Welcome Year 10. Thank you very much for logging on and having a look at this online assessment video. You can probably tell who I am from my horrid recording voice, but the main thing is that today we're understanding, or you're understanding, exactly what you need to do during your assessment. Of course, you can pause the video whenever you'd like, but please watch it through the whole way. And then really make sure that you contact your teachers immediately if you don't know what's going on. Okay, so moving on here, what we've done is we've sent out this email to yourselves as well as your parents to tell you what's going on. Now, the first thing you can see is that obviously you've accessed this video that you're watching now. That's a bit of a given. And as I said before, this is really to prepare you for your assessment. What you must do today, assuming that it is Tuesday and you are following this plan here, is that you watch the video through, okay? Then you complete a quick activity at the end of this video, all right? I'll tell you what to do, but by sending this activity through to your teachers, we can actually give you some valuable feedback before you write your short story. This is trying to counteract with the whole idea that we can't see you in classrooms. So it's really important that you utilize that opportunity. If you fail to email your teachers with that activity, there's nothing we can do to give you that feedback. So please make sure you're responsible with that. What you should do afterwards is, as it says here, look at your stimulus for your assessment. Okay. By looking at that stimulus, you can choose, first and foremost, which one you want to use, but then you can also go through and start to fill out your 150-word planning grid. Now, this is to guide you. This is always used in this type of exam in Year 10. It's there to help you with your planning. If you don't do it, it's not marked, so I don't want to put any extra stress on you, but still, before 9 a.m. on Wednesday, you need to send that either partially done or fully done to your teacher, but they won't be providing feedback to you. Okay, not on that 150-word grid. Once you've done that, okay, then you have all of this time through here. Okay, obviously we know you have other subjects, but you have all of this time through here until 9 a.m. on Friday to send us your final short story. Okay, the really important thing that I want you guys to gather is the idea that your daily writing from the last few weeks, your ideas from the last few weeks, ideas that we discussed in class last term, all of that can be used for this assessment. You don't need to come up with a brand new idea. You just need to make sure that you're not plagiarizing and that you are following the task requirements. So again, I guess what I'm saying is we're here, we've watched this video, okay? What you need to do next is complete the activity at the end of this video, send that to your teacher, read the feedback that they send to you. They'll try to get it back to you on Tuesday if you send it fast, okay? And then you're doing your 150-word planning grid if you can, and working towards submitting your story before 9 a.m. on Friday. The last thing that I will say is make sure that you can access eLearn. If it's not submitted on there by the right time and date, which is here, then it will not be marked. Okay, so let's move on. All right, essentially all we're doing today is unpacking the text stimuli that can be used in your exam. Okay, so all the text on this PowerPoint for you, you can use that and you will see that on your stimulus sheet. The images are not the same as your stimulus images on your exam. You'll see that they're really similar, but they are just on this PowerPoint today as a guide for what sorts of things you might do when it comes to your actual exam stimuli. Again, if this isn't clear, please make sure that you contact your teacher about it. Okay? So let's have a look at this first stimulus that's here. All right, this excerpt is from Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. Okay, most of you would have come across this in class, But this is on your exam, and you may choose it as one of your stimulus items if you would like. All right. The first thing that I would like you to do is go through and read it. All right. Pause the video so that you can do that. Okay, so the first thing that you should have noticed is that there's a rhythm and flow to the text. All right. This is developed by a combination of language features, alliteration, and rhyme. In order to use this as your stimulus, you would need to be inspired by this. Okay, so what that means is you would need to ensure that you're utilizing alliteration and rhyme in your short story. In saying this, you wouldn't want to go overboard. Furthermore, if we were to look at the text overall, you can identify that there's a setting. All right, setting can refer to time and place, or the character's surroundings in general. See if you can identify first and foremost one word in that first line that establishes the time of day. Right? You should have hopefully found that we're talking about midnight up here. Similarly, notice that there's a word that's identifying an object, establishing that you were indoors, Okay, so you should have recognized that we're talking about a door. Okay, chamber door, talking about bedroom door. That's inferring that we're indoors. So again, if you were to use this stimulus, you would need to ensure that your short story aligns with this setting. Does that mean that you need to set your short story in a chamber or in a bedroom as the original text did? No, not necessarily, but you would need to have a doorway of some kind within your story for it to make sense. In saying this, I will take time to explain to you that you don't need to quote the excerpt if you choose to use it as a written stimulus. You can just use the ideas from it, but your story must parallel what's going on in it. Okay. Now, beyond the things that I've mentioned, I would highly or strongly recommend that you're addressing any vocabulary in this text that you're unfamiliar with to ensure that you understand it. Or perhaps you might just want to use that vocabulary in your short story if you think there's something valuable in there. But the biggest message that I would put across to you is to remember that, you don't have to choose a written stimulus. It's not a good idea to use a stimulus that you don't understand. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a break and let's look at an image to break it up. Okay, note again that this is an example stimulus. Okay, so what we're doing is we're going through the process of analysing a visual stimulus. There will be, as you can hopefully see by now, a stimulus on your exam sheet that looks familiar to this. So you might want to take some ideas from it. Okay, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through what you should do with your stimulus should you choose to use a visual. So firstly, let's look at it. Think about what's in front of us. Okay, what we see is a hallway. Perhaps we could call it a corridor or a seemingly endless pathway to a distinct door. Okay, chuck some description in there. But it's always useful to think of better description than the plainly obvious. Okay, we could assume, or I would assume, that this corridor is old. Maybe it's abandoned. If I start to think of my senses, I can see the ripped wallpaper and dark, ominous arches. I can also see small, peculiar lamps lining the walls. Now, in my mind, I imagine those lights would be flickering in my Gothic story. It's not in the image, but it's a fair assumption to make. Okay, what that means is I'm still inspired by the image, so it would be okay. I also see an image on the wall. It kind of looks like a lady, but I can't see it clearly, so I could change that image in my story to be of another person, whoever I wanted. Okay, there's of course more that you could see and think about, but this is an example, so I will start to move on. Okay, so what might I hear in this corridor? Maybe it's quiet, maybe there's rattling of timber in the wind outside, or from a window behind the camera. Okay, it would certainly make sense if I could hear the lights buzzing and flickering in odd and unorganized patterns. Okay, taste. this is often the hardest sense, at least for me. So what you really want to try do is put yourself in that scene. Okay, so for example, I've already decided it's an old corridor that's abandoned. From that alone, I could assume that there's some thick, lingering taste of stale air, or perhaps there's that damp timber, that one that hangs on the back of your tongue. Or for the smell, that builds off what you can taste. So maybe you could smell that damp timber as well, that really horrid smell. Okay, perhaps I could smell the air coming through the holes in the wall, but I think that's a little far-fetched because the holes in the wall don't seem that big. Okay, so think about reasonable assumptions that you can make from your image. And then discussing touch finally. Okay, or maybe you feel the decaying walls and the uneven surfaces, or the carpet could be wet underfoot. Perhaps you touch your cheek and you can feel yourself trembling because your character's really nervous. But all in all, what we've done is we're unpacking the stimulus to brainstorm story ideas. Okay, and I think it's a given that if you choose this image as your stimulus, or the similar image, you would be using it for your setting because that's what it's showing you. Okay, does that mean that you would have to set your whole story in a corridor? Of course not. Okay, that's not something I would do, but something significant would have to happen here. Okay. Now, if we move on to the next one, okay, and I would suggest that you take a breath, stop the video for a second, and stretch because I'm talking a lot. But what we're doing now is we're going to move through the other examples a little bit more quickly than we did before, so a briefer version. Okay, the main point again of this lesson is simply to have you understand how you can generate your own ideas. Okay, so pause the video here and have a quick read through the text first and foremost. Okay, now you could argue that this piece of text also utilizes pacing to enthrall the reader. Okay, so if you have a look at it, you can see that the commas make a reader stop and take a quick breath. Okay, so we can see commas through here, obviously we've got the full stops as well, comma, 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 going completely out of order, but there's commas everywhere in there. Okay, they also use an ellipsis that you can see in here. Okay, now what an ellipsis does specifically, is draw out the writer's thoughts, and it links one idea to another. Okay, I would be assuming that if you were to choose this text as your stimulus, that you would utilize this punctuation guided pacing in your own writing. Okay, mind you, all of you should be using punctuation for impact. Moving on, it's clear that this text establishes that some sort of pain has brought upon a new personality to the character. Okay, this screams characterization to me. So it's certainly not establishing setting like the image that we just looked at. Okay, so to use this stimulus, I would identify the words that describe the character. Okay, does the character develop? Or, in other words, change? Could this change become a turning point or a problem in your story? They're the sorts of things that you need to think about. Again, you would need to unpack the text further to ensure you understand all of the vocabulary. It would be a really good idea to have a look at the figurative language that it uses as well. Okay, but to repeat my remark from earlier, if you don't understand it, it's not a good idea to use this stimulus. Okay. All right, back to another image. So this image focuses on characterization too. What it shows us is two characters, male and female, pretty obvious, okay, who are in wedding attire. Now it's important to note that you don't need to take the image literally. That is, if you know what movie this is from, you don't need to use the same storyline as the movie. You can and should be creating your own plot. Okay. As another example, you may not have obscure animated characters in your story. You may simply have a couple. A man who has a narrow jaw and perhaps looks quite faint, or similarly, the female could be fairly slim and might be cold-hearted or unemotional. Okay, where did I get the cold, unemotional ideas from, you ask? I got those ideas from the blue hair and the skin color in the image. I just didn't take it literally. Okay, I would now take some time to pause the video and unpack the image according to your senses, just like I did with the image before. Okay, think about how you could translate this to become the basis of a short story. Okay. Moving on. Okay. Unlike the stimulus before, this text is clearly talking about a problem. Okay, if you haven't already, pause it, have a read through it. But what this text does is it acknowledges a physical obstacle, as well as the fact that somebody is lost. If we keep it simple, what you should be doing is identifying any vocabulary that you are unfamiliar with and finding definitions for each word you don't understand. What you do then is you think about the problem, what it is and what it could have led to, and think about how that could build into a short story timeline. Would it become a minor or a major problem? If it's the major problem of your story, what would have been a minor problem? If it was the minor problem, what's the major problem? You need to unpack it like that. Okay? You should be noticing by this stage that each time we're reading through the text excerpt or we're looking at the image, we're thinking about what it's showing us. So is it showing us setting, characterization, forming an aesthetic? Okay. What's it doing? What's it providing us with? Okay. But let's have a look at the next image. Okay. So now we move to another example, which appears to be of an abandoned and mangled forest of some sorts. Okay, it cries setting, that's for sure. But let's think about this in a little more depth. To include a tree trunk or something similar in the story would barely utilize the stimulus, so you need to think of something better. You could notice how the image fades, revealing less in the background. Extrapolate that whoever is in this place is isolated. Maybe you can, maybe you disagree. Could you extrapolate that whoever is in this place is lost? That's another idea. Now, both of these ideas are plausible, and you could easily work them into a story. Okay, the idea is to build off the basic image and, as we would usually say, read between the lines. Okay, to try to take greater ideas and themes from the image rather than just the tree trunk, okay, or rather than just the birds. Look into it, read into it. Use these questions to guide you and link it to more little ideas throughout your story. Okay, so what I would do is think about those senses, answer these questions in your head. Okay. How could they, in the end, contribute to a plan for a short story? Okay. So, Year 10, we are almost there. Okay, bear with me, there's not too long to go now. We have a short text this time, one that establishes characterization. Have a read through it. Okay. It's talking about the existence of a hand that is of supernatural nature and the existence of a presumably innocent character who is experiencing this horrible feeling. What we would do, same process as usual. Identify and define any words you don't understand. Identify any figurative language or pacing in there. think about how you could incorporate these ideas into a story. Really simple. That should be in your brain now, that you're following this same process, trying to draw more out of the images. Okay? But now it's your turn. What we're going to do, I told you there was going to be an activity at the end that you needed to send through to your teachers. Okay, if you don't, that's a lost opportunity for you. What you need to do is open a Word document and, just like I have on the slides before, unpack the stimulus. You don't need to word it in a formal manner. You can just write a script of your thoughts, which is essentially what I've been doing for you. Okay, but what you should be doing is using these questions here on this side of the slide to guide you. You will need to pause this video to give yourself time to complete it, but once you've done this, obviously press play. Okay, you should have now finished unpacking the visual stimulus and have it typed on that Word document that I was talking about. Now it's time to do the exact same thing for this written stimulus. So as I have been doing before, read through the text, look at the vocabulary. All right, is there anything you don't understand? Your notes might have some definitions. You might talk about whether it's talking about characterization or setting or so on and so forth. And then start to pick out those language features or those ideas that you could then draw into a story. Make sure you press pause and you unpack the stimulus that's on your screen now. And of course, press play when you're ready. And we're done. Okay, just about. So please listen to my final comments and then send your work immediately to your teacher today, which is hopefully Tuesday. Okay. So, long story short, it's on the screen. Contact your teacher if you're unsure about this. If you can't reach your teacher or your teacher doesn't reply in a quick time frame, they're prioritizing you, but they are busy. Call the head of department. Call the school. See who you can catch on to. All right? But what you're doing beyond that, if you understand everything, is you're looking at the prompt in the middle of your stimulus sheet. It explains that you are to use the visual and written stimuli to inspire a short story of your own creation. Clearly indicate which stimulus you've selected. Now, yours might look or sound a little bit different, but basically you were given stimulus for your exam in the attached files that were emailed out to you. Pick 1 or 2 stimulus items. It is perfectly fine to go with 1. Okay? That means you can focus all of your ideas coming from 1 stimulus. Okay? Then identify what your chosen image or your chosen text is at the top of your short story. Okay, so you might go at the top of your Word document for your actual essay, for your actual short story. I am using the stimulus from the excerpt, The Hand. Okay, then what you do, use the stimulus in a clever way to inform or inspire your story. That's pretty much it. If I come back here, again, you are just following this process here. So you've sent the activity through to your teacher now, hopefully, or are about to. Now you use the 150 word grid to help you. If it doesn't help you, forget about it. Prioritize your assessment. Then spend this time through here. You don't have to wait till Thursday night. You've got all this time. Utilize it to benefit yourself. Go through everything that we've just gone through for your chosen stimulus and come up with a short story. Make sure you edit it and make sure it gets on eLearn before 9 a.m. on Friday. All right? My absolute best wishes sending out to you guys. I hope this has been helpful for you. Thanks, Year 10.